Okay, do you mind if I say your first name?
No, of course not.
Okay, Susanna, you're on your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th, 6th week of the...
6 weeks.
So you're getting close to the end. You're kind of coming closer to the end. And it's been a very spiritual experience for you.
Has.
Well, that's because we started it out that way. Mm-hmm. You had read Weight Loss Apocalypse prior to coming in.
Yes, which I think I recommend everybody to read it before coming, because before not having read the book, I had a mindset of HCG protocol as a diet.
Oh, before you read it?
Before I read it. Once I read it, I realized, and I think you do a very good job in the book, saying it over and over again, this is not another diet. This is a program to balance your hormonal system. Mm-hmm. And it goes deeper than just a diet, because if you go to a diet, it's going to be over in 2 weeks, and guess what? I already know what's going to happen. I'm going to gain all the weight back, and my behavior is not going to be modified in a long-term basis.
Yeah.
And the book made me understand very clearly that if I want to do this, it's going to be genuinely because I want a transformation from here on forward till the end of my life.
Isn't that empowering?
For me, understanding that created a lot of freedom. Maybe for other people might create fear of, oh my gosh, now I have to change for the rest of my life. Actually, for me, it created freedom in the sense that now I can hold on to something that is good for my body, that I know I'm doing well, mm-hmm. and I can live this way for the rest of my life instead of not change, mm-hmm. or just within the mentality of the diet saying change for 2 weeks and then change to the previous way I was, which got me sick, to be wanting to do a short-term diet. Yeah. I'm sick of those changes. Now I want a lasting change, so when I read the book, it gave me a lot of hope.
Yeah, and all that change that the diet industry and the food industry does is they micromanage food. They pick it apart.
Yeah.
It's overwhelming. And what I find so fascinating is how that industry thinks they're so smart, that they're smarter than the human body.
Well, they are the smart financially because they care about themselves. That is why they put every other week a new fat diet or a new product or a new way of eating, the grains, the pyramid in the 1990s.
Oh, God.
It becomes a mantra. The potatoes were good in the 1990s. Breads were good, but the industry didn't educate the people about the processed breads, the processed flour versus the good flour that the body was supposed to absorb.
Yeah, and a lot of that they didn't know mm-hmm. until recently.
Okay.
But now there's a huge business developed around the processing.
Well, look at it, the cereals.
They have to back out of huge money.
Yeah. The cereals, the Cheerios, all the cereals that have labels of good for you, nutritious for you, are loaded with sugar.
And candy. It's like, mm-hmm. I call it breakfast candy. But anyways. Aside from that, the problem is moralizing all of it. Yeah. How many people, when we say we're going to eat healthy or clean, who's making, are you an expert at what's best for the body when and all mm-hmm. the rhythms of the body? And are you the expert of the food? Because in order for you to have the expertise, you truly have to know and understand more than the body does.
Right. And
to manage it, and to manage it for someone else's body. You have to understand their body.
Exactly.
And their rhythms, and it's impossible.
Well, and it is, and what I liked, one of the many things I liked about your book is teaching the individual to read or absorb the information that the body is sending to the individual's mm-hmm. mind.
Yeah, because the body is very, very good at messaging.
We don't know how to interpret what the body is saying to us. We as people, as individuals, are so used to sending information from the mind to the body. But how many times do we really listen to the body? Don't eat that cake. You already have 5 pieces, and you have to eat more. And the skin is burning. Yeah. I feel bloated. How many times do we really, the mind takes time to say, okay, this is what my body's saying, and I'm going to follow that.
Well, you have to have the intent to listen to it first. Then you have to understand what it's communicating.
So it has to be an education, and your book does that. Your book brings awareness on how to receive the information that the body's trying to cry for you to listen.
That's the truth. But, you know, this gets down to that brain wiring.
Yeah.
You know, where how many of us have overactive narcotic areas of the brain, and that is driving behavior. Because we trained it to. Because we're not born with, you know, underactive dopamine centers in the brain. We're born for, in general, functioning. Yes. Our brains are functioning well, you know, and we over time have the emotional behavior, because we're intelligent, right? We dictate behavior, especially in a society of gluttony, to where we're the ones that are creating an imbalanced brain chemistry.
Right.
Plus the food on top of that just accelerates it, because it's highly palatable, sugar food. So, you know, when you combine the emotion and then secondary the food.
Plus all the messages that we receive constantly everywhere. In the grocery store, you look at the newspapers, you look at the magazine covers.
And don't forget our friends and family.
TV, everything.
Friends, family, and culture too.
Yeah. So since
this is the way we
grow
eat.
up,
this is who you are. This is how we eat, and this is what you're going to do. And you believe that.
So in that sense, it's a very oppressive environment. So how do we free the question for me, as I have been in the protocol for 6 weeks, how do I free myself from moment to moment from the oppressive messages that I get?
Well, I'm thinking that you're being oppressed. Because I think we talked about, I don't know, it was with you or someone else, the mind of someone who is being deprived. This basic psychology of deprivation. If you're being deprived, it means something's being taken away from you, or you're not allowed to have something.
Right. We talked about the realm of abundance and scarcity.
Correct. So if you're feeling deprived, you're entitled to something, and it isn't, and you have a right to it, but it is being withheld or taken away. So the psychology of that would then be to feel as if you are lacking.
Yes, so it creates
the
attachment
power
for the desire. Yes. It becomes an obsession. Once you realize that you cannot have it, the mind gets addicted, thinking, obsessing about what you cannot have.
It's basic. This is such basic psychology. And then what happens to your motive? Because if you're being deprived of it, you're now lacking freedom. And remember we talked about, what are we compensating for in this culture? That we have this, we've passed down this view that we are lacking. When did this start?
When did it
The Depression. I truly believe it was the Depression made a huge shift of consciousness. If you look
scarcity, the lack, I don't have this, I don't have that.
Yes, which probably was a huge part of why we had the Industrial Revolution, which mass-produced food, which we've got to compensate for this. Then we had that generation force-feeding children. And that next generation, which was my parents, the baby boomer generation, was the one that started the whole diet industry. Anyways, my God. It makes a lot of sense psychologically when you look at why are we still acting like we are living in scarcity when in fact we are living in gluttony.
Yeah, gluttony physically. And one thing that I became aware here in the last 6 weeks is that, okay, how do I live from now on in the world of abundance? But I'm just not talking in abundance of, when I say abundance, I don't refer to excess of food, excess of pleasure.
Abundance means that you're willing to give it away. You have enough. You have enough, and it's not defined by what you don't have.
Because I have abundance, I can share it with people. Whatever my reality is, there is something precious within who I am as an individual that I can share with others. So that's abundance. So this new knowledge for me is abundance. Because from this, then I say, I don't need other cosmetic ways of saying, I have so many material things, so much food, so many cakes, or whatever it
All
is.
the purses,
You
all the
just name
shoes,
all
all
the
the clothes,
purses.
all
Yes.
the bigger house,
Uh-huh.
the square footage, the boat,
No,
you
the
don't
abundance
need it.
is from within.
Yeah.
The context is recontextualizing what does abundance mean, not in the context of just the physical of having things, many things,
Yeah.
but who am I as a person? Am I
Yes.
in abundance?
Well, and this takes us to what we were talking about previously, which is you had family this weekend,
Oh yes, yes.
and you were making waffles.
Oh,
And normally in that environment,
it was
because it is,
horrible.
you would have felt deprived.
Yes.
Because on this protocol, and you've cheated a few times feeling this
have.
way, especially in
Yeah.
that family cultural
Because I
environment.
already know that
You're
I
from
cheated.
Mexico, right?
Yes, I'm
So you have
from Mexico.
you have a Mexican culture, and there's a lot of food
Oh,
culture
yes.
in that, which is awesome.
And actually, I do cook. I was telling my family this weekend that I was in the cabin. One way of expressing my love is cooking all these wonderful things, and I can spend hours and hours in the kitchen.
Which is
But
an
there
act
was-
of abundance.
Yeah.
You need to know that. By giving, you're showing abundance.
And I was explaining to one of my nephews who is Anglo-Saxon, my husband's family. As he was watching me cook this very intricate dish. It was a French dish that I was making for them, and I didn't eat any, but I was so happy cooking. And I said, "Did you ever watch the movie of like Water for Chocolate?" And he said, "Yes." Well, I said, "This is the way I relate to people when I show them my love. I want to cook for them all these things. But in the new context of what is abundance with my relationship to food, it's not about I eating that food. It's about I creating it and giving joy to the people around me.
So it's the act of abundance.
It's the
So
act of
in the
abundance.
past,
It would be, I cannot
you would have
have it.
felt correct. You would have felt because I can't partake, I don't have abundance.
Not my individual self. Even if I was creating abundance for others, I still was in scarcity. I cannot have this food.
So there's a lot of like conflict in the act of giving abundance, but yet feeling deprived.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the
No
difference.
wonder it was confusing.
Yeah, so no, that was the difference between 2 weeks ago. So it's very interesting as I'm becoming more observant of my thought process, my behavior, and my engagement in living life. I thought to myself, 2 weeks ago I had a company from Mexico and it was wonderful. But my aunt was cooking all these wonderful dishes that I had not had for 15 years. And I was eating them, but I still was in my mentality mode of scarcity that this was bad because I was in the protocol. So I felt when I was eating, and of course I did eat all of the things she cooked, but I did not enjoy them because I felt guilty about, oh my gosh, I cannot have this, I'm eating it. So that was an internal conflict. So after that, I came and talked to you, and I said, God, I did terrible this week because of the food and all of that. And then this next week, I guess what? I get to entertain, and I get to cook for 10 people in my cabin. But then there was a bigger realization after you and I talked about the world of scarcity and the world of abundance. Mm-hmm. Then I asked, as I was cooking all this food, I asked myself, well, what does it mean to me to shift from I cannot have this food, which I'm cooking for everybody else, and I love that food. Mm-hmm. How can I put it in the new context of abundance in relationship between myself and the food I'm cooking?
And giving it.
And giving it, exactly.
And feeling like happy
I'm
to
whole.
give.
I'm whole despite not eating it. But despite not eating it doesn't mean I cannot eat it. It means this is a choice because I don't need to eat this food. Yeah. I already know what it tastes. I can do it.
And you're fulfilled.
I fulfill internally because I choose to live in abundance, not from my relationship to the food I can eat or cannot eat, but through how I'm living in the moment. Yes. Am I creating abundance by my actions of love
Well,
in relationship to the other individuals.
Well, and to do that, you had to create it ahead of time. Is this something you were thinking about prior to this?
Yeah,
So
when
you
I went to the grocery
it.
store, it was actually, things, I do believe that coincidence don't happen by chance. Because as I was buying the groceries for this weekend that I was going to entertain, I remember how it felt when I went with my aunt 2 weeks ago to buy all the ingredients that she needed. Well, then I said, this is a great difference in how I am buying all the groceries. Last week, with my aunt from Mexico, I was buying things of, how good, this looks great, I cannot have it. This looks great, I cannot eat it.
Yeah, and then we talked also too, remember, about your heritage and creating an identity around the facts that you are from Mexico.
Yeah.
And you're Hispanic.
And I'm nurturing, women in Mexico,
Yes.
I
and
grew
this
up.
is how they nurture. And if you're that your identity as this culture, that some of this is breaking that identity.
That identity, exactly.
And so the challenge was, who are you if
that.
you are not Hispanic?
Well, the question that you posed to me last time we met is, who are you? Well, now you're Hispanic, okay? You told me. Now, who are you without that identity? Who are you without being a woman? Okay, now you're a man. Who are you? Now you're an African American woman, or you're a French woman. Who are you? So does my definition of who I am keeps changing as you're asking me those questions? And then the major question that build the momentum towards the major question, which I loved, is when you ask me, who are you without any identification to any material or physical identity?
Because that is the foundation. That is the foundation of your soul.
Of your soul.
It cannot be defined by where you're born and the way they speak in the language.
No.
You know what I mean?
It goes deep. So once you ask me, who are you without any physical identity, then I said, I get it. It got really deep to my soul. And then I said, this is freedom.
It is. Well, because you can be Hispanic.
I can be, and I can welcome it,
Yes.
but without being afraid of all the things that I cannot.
Well, it removes the ego. It removes the ego. It would be like, for me, remember, I was raised in America, which has unique cultural, there's really no specific cultural boundary. As you know, you live here.
Yeah.
I think the main one is religion. If I'm not raised to be my culture, I'm raised to be my religion.
Okay, sure.
Chew on that one. Just chew on it. And so when I broke free from that ideology of religion, consider the moral conflict with that, because it's so you're morally indoctrinated.
Yes, am I willing to detach from that identity?
And expose myself to rejection from my parents, siblings, family, and all of my identity that was forced that I memorize.
Wow.
And if you think about what we were talking about, it is a very clear parallel. Now, does that mean that I have hate, anger, judgment towards the religious ideology I was raised to have? No, oh my God, absolutely not. I can still go to church with my siblings or my mom, or my dad doesn't go anymore, but and I can still enjoy it. I don't believe that isn't my identity, but I can still be there and experience a filtered version of what I can have on my own.
Right.
Does that make sense?
And then, yes,
Anyways.
and exactly, so you can incorporate that reality of identity, which is material,
Correct.
to your greater identity, which comes from the source, is the soul.
Totally. And I have, there's history in my family line with this religion. I mean, crossing the plains, and this is, I've generations of this religion. So I get it, how it would feel. So, when I say, who are you if you were not Hispanic. I'm not saying give that up.
No,
I'm saying
I totally understood it.
It's like here's your identity from whatever it was that you were taught and raised to be, and here is you.
Right.
All I'm doing is saying these aren't one thing. This is not one thing. They are very separate. And the more you can separate the two, the more you can be aware of there's a difference.
And then the more gentle you are in living life.
And
the
you're
more
less
gentle
likely to judge
am,
other people
exactly.
against your model.
And the more gentle I am to my being Hispanic, or to I just thinking myself I'm an African American woman, I become very gentle to that. Or I am an American man, I become very gentle to that.
Yeah, and you don't have to defend it.
No,
Because
it's just acceptance.
Yeah, there's no, because you don't have an ego with it. It's not something that makes you less than or above someone else.
And you know, the interesting thing that before reaching the consciousness of who I am as an identity bigger than the physical identity, there is a fear in finding out who am I. Well, if I'm not a Mexican woman, I'm afraid to find out who I am because I don't know what the answer to that is.
Yeah,
but
and how many people feel that way about obesity, too?
Obesity is the same thing.
If I am not a fat person, then who am I?
Exactly.
Because this has been so defining. Or if I'm not on a diet.
It's the same thing. If I'm not on a diet, if I'm not in this game that I'm playing.
It's an identity, and I talk about this. This is an identity crisis. It's a crisis of identity. Who are you? And those are very difficult things to break free from because the brain memorizes the pattern of thinking, which brings us on to this next observation that you had watching one of my videos.
So actually, the observation, which right now I'm thinking about the who am I, and once we are willing to give up the fear of even answering the question, just staying with the question instead of the seeking for the answer, who am I, the more who am I besides my identity, the fear is going to go weaker and weaker. And then what I experience is that by continuing to ask who I am, there was this light becoming bigger and bigger within myself. And there was this great peace and silence, actually, that I say, I just thought, love, and I told you I was relating that to you, and I started having tears, and you too, and say, wow, this is the most beautiful reality.
Like you exist with the trees.
And I say, I choose to remind myself, because we do forget, remind myself as many times in the day as I can that I am that love that brings tears to my physical eyes. But then as I walk, as I stepped in every surface, as I walk through the day, then there is gratitude.
Because nothing can give or take to that existence.
No.
Nothing can.
And then that existence can share something that the world is so thirsty for.
Yes.
Which is love.
And
a real acceptance and humility and gratitude.
Yeah, that you are alone.
Exactly.
Totally capable of existing in a higher state of consciousness that it doesn't get, you don't achieve that.
So it's not judgment of my, I am fat, I'm obese, I am beautiful.
As you are.
And then the relationship to my body is, well, if I am that love, I'm going to love the physical body, the physical instrument that the love expresses itself with in this physical world. I'm going to take care of it, and I'm going to love it, no matter how it is, because the more nurture I give, and not nurture through food or the physical, but nurture from the gut, which means through that soul, then my body is going to say, I arrive home.
And you'll do what it says.
Then I'll become the mind will become a good listener to the signals.
Yeah, you become a good partner. It's like a happy marriage between the soul, the non-physical and the physical.
So going back to what I was telling you this morning as you were coming, listened to one of your videos and I thought, oh my God,
Can you hold on real quick? Okay.
you were talking to one of my partners here, my friends, in this quest for
Yeah.
having a different relationship to our body and to life, actually, about what the brain needs to experience before the switch can happen to a higher consciousness of understanding in a bigger sense what am I trying to accomplish. It's not just a fat diet, a 2 week, and then I'm back to the same old BS. Is the brain has to have an explosion,
And the atomic
bomb
to rewire.
And
Because some of our behaviors
Yes.
from the mammal part, it's like what I said earlier is your brain has got this prefrontal cortex, which is highly intelligent. It processes, and we are so capable of much, much more than any other mammal.
Yeah. So
But because we have mammal areas of the brain that function in survival, there's this coordination between that positive physical reinforcement, negative physical reinforcement. Positive reinforcement physically would be coming from the narcotic area of the brain, the dopamine center. The negative area would be fight or flight, fear.
So, yeah.
And so we have coordination between the two in our behavior, in what triggers those to function.
Right.
Our state of consciousness and how we perceive the world. So your perspective, that old perspective out of being, and the body cannot tell the difference between that psychological, emotional threat to identity to being physically threatened to death. So it manifests the same way. So if you're being held captive in a jail, that's how it feels when you're feeling deprived. Like that feels grounded or limited or shackled away from something that you feel entitled to. Yeah. That feeling can cause a brain reaction that is from the mammal. It's from this, we live on this earth, and it can drive our behavior.
And it is at precisely that specific point that the brain can have the atomic bomb explosion. But we have to allow it to happen. So now, how do I allow the brain to be in the state where there is a crash of all the patterns that it has created with the attachment for the food? Is when I in front of an ice cream cone, an ice cream bucket.
Yes.
And then I have the urge, I have to have it. I cannot have it. I have to have it. So that's the attachment to the addiction, all those things. So the more I'm in that tension of not having it, wanting to have it, and before I said, to heck, I'm going to have it, and everything else rational that I know rationally goes outside of the window, I need the brain to go to red zone that, oh my God, the atomic explosion is coming, and surrender to it.
Yeah, you have to let it exist. You cannot fight it.
Do not fight it, and do not give in to, I'm going to have the whole bucket of ice cream. I'm not going to have it.
Because the brain is wiring. It's saying, no, in the past you've done this many, many, many times, and this is what you do.
And this is
My
what you do.
dopamine drops. You want it, you judge it, you criticize it,
and
there's
then you
guilt
end up
because you
having
want
it.
Then you justify and rationalize it, which is totally shutting off the prefrontal cortex, and then you go get it.
And then you feel worse.
Well, you're fixing the dopamine problem, but now you're criticizing that too. So it's just a world of guilt and feeling like crap about yourself. But your brain, you created the wiring of it.
Right.
So you're going to get the impulse, and how do you rewire it? You don't respond.
You don't respond.
It goes there.
And then the brain has a massive shock. And then
the shock feels sad, depressed, irritable, anxious. It can go into a full-blown panic attack if you're that addicted. I know, and you have to not respond to it. What does that require?
For me,
humility.
Well, and then to say that, to go to that identity which is deeper than identity, and ask that identity of love, the soul, just to go there and say, hold me for the next 2 seconds, and as I'm having this obsession with the thing that is going to create more pain, wanting to eat that bucket of ice cream or whatever, and say, just hold it for 2 seconds or 3 seconds till it passes.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're kind of taking the power out of it.
Mm-hmm. So you take the moment, the impulse, that impulse that is so forceful.
It's
It
physical
feels like
and it's real.
Yes. And
it's not made up. Too many people think that that's them,
it's
and
a
there's
tsunami.
There's
It overwhelms the tsunami. The
Yes.
physical tsunami of the impulse overwhelms you, and as it is overwhelming you, I say, you just hold me in your hands right now.
Yep.
Because it's too power.
Mm-hmm.
I want to surrender to a greater way of living life, not to the pattern that I know I have done thousands of times and has gotten me so sick to say I'm willing to change anything. But actually the change, if I'm really willing to change everything because I'm sick of all the things that I have done in the past that have not worked, I have to do something different that I have not done in the past.
That's Einstein's quote that I use all the time.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a lot of them, but this is my favorite. No state of consciousness, no problem can be solved from the same state of consciousness that created it.
Right. So
you have to have a new state of consciousness.
And where do I get
That's
the
atomic
power
bomb.
and the power for the greater being within me, the physical identity, to be able to do that? Is just to say that bigger identity that I cannot see, but I do feel when I listen to my voice, because this voice is not, I'm not thinking from my brain, that I say, you hold me just for this moment so I can free myself from this slavery that I have been living all these years.
Yeah, well, and how I visualize it too is you've got a pathway etched in the brain. It is so deep, and that existence of that pathway of thinking, you falsely attached an identity to it. Mm-hmm. And so when you're not going to go that direction anymore, it's physically your brain. If you don't react to it, you're basically saying, I don't believe this bullshit anymore.
I love that.
And it kind of goes haywire in the brain
anymore.
You don't.
And that is true.
Even though it is so ingrained in the brain processing of information, it says, no, you have to go from A to B to C to D. And you're saying, no, you don't.
No.
You don't. You could go from A to Z, A to M, M to B. There's a plethora of wiring
that you can create.
Correct. And one thing I've learned from my own experience is I will never use just one direction again.
Oh, wow.
Ever again.
That is beautiful.
So what do you
beautiful.
think my capacity of thinking is at this point?
Limitless.
It is limitless. And the other thing is when I'm working with someone, I'm not trying to conform you to my view. I'm trying to get into your head so that you can see it from a different view,
and that I
can
find
get out
my own way, and
yes.
that I can. You're offering, and I think you're very perceptive when you talk to me. You go exactly where I am, so I can. You don't give me the answers. You allow me to listen to myself, create answers outside of the realm of what I had already said before, because what I had already done and said and did before did not work.
No, it was relative to A to B to C to D.
Exactly.
And it will never work in that order.
No.
So, but that's all you know, and that's what your brain is telling you to do. Mm-hmm. But once you get an awareness of what the brain is memorizing what I have told it, so it's going to have a fight or flight reaction to stopping it, because it thinks that's what's safe.
Yeah.
So to not go that route and to start a new brain wiring, it's going to feel like murder. It literally does. The body
and does the atomic bomb.
It is the atomic bomb, which is so worth it. And when the stories of people who have done this, Eckhart Tolle, I mean, he wrote about it in his book too. Your awareness and state of awareness goes beyond normal comprehension.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It really does. That moment when you said, I felt so... It was an amazing peace. That's what happens when you don't conform the brain and you don't conform your ability to be aware of this state that we live in. It's like now you see the trees differently. You see the sky differently. You see air and breathing from a totally different view.
Drinking a glass of water
Yes,
differently.
it is water. You look at the moon from a different place. I mean, it's just our existence
It's so blessed and
is
rich.
very, very different than, you know.
Then then when we get to that point, and I'm not saying that I wish, and I know I'm going to be.
We're all
going-
kind of in this game
we are going, and now that I discovered this beautiful path, and there are times that I'm going to back to, because like you say, the patterns in the brain are so ingrained. But now I know the more I am able to live in this new path of light.
or in existence.
Just existence. Instead
Uh-huh.
of, there is a big distinction. I was
Yeah.
talking to you, Robin, about, when we use vocabulary, when we use words, the power of words is tremendous. When we start making distinctions of what one word means versus another, then we can really calibrate into which sequence of energy we want to
Correct.
stay
It's
in.
the integrity. So when I say healthy, what does that mean?
Healthy, what does that mean?
Correct.
For if I'm in the diet mentality, healthy means I'm going to stay healthy for 2 weeks.
It means no sugar, no carbs.
Exactly.
It means paleo. It means
Exactly.
exercise. It means a lot of exercise. It means it's relative to the context of your brain wiring.
Identification.
A, B, C, and D.
Exactly.
And it's so bullshit.
So definitions of words and what they do to our behavior is so powerful, and most of the time we're not aware of. I tell myself and friends, when I share my way of living life, I say, well, if you really want to learn how you live life, record a conversation with anybody. Record it and see for half an hour and identify which words you use. There is a pattern in which words we use more than which words we use less. So after you listen to yourself as an observer, objective observer of what you're saying, you can really see if you're living in the realm of wholeness or in the realm of judgment, constraint,
The persona,
castigation,
having to express your
conform.
identity. You
Yes,
need to know
or
who I am.
Exactly. So
and
big
what I
for
live
me
by.
to say right, wrong, or this.
Yeah, that's true.
So just listen to how you're talking, and that's going to give you a very good sense of what your relationship is with yourself.
I was just going to say with yourself.
With yourself.
It's not with him.
No, it's with
yourself.
yourself, because
Yeah.
from the relationship with yourself stems all relationships with living things and inanimate objects. Do you treat everything with reverence, with love, with respect, or do you treat it being upset at things?
Hierarchies. I'm better than you. I'm
Yes.
better than this. We're higher than this.
Or this
You're
bothers
below
me. I hate my car.
which is
I hate my clothes, or I hate my whatever it is. What is in your vocabulary? And
I
then
love
welcome
this.
everything that you learn. I mean, if for me, if I listen to myself and say, if I notice that I say in my vocabulary in the 30 minutes that I'm recording, I hate this, I don't like this, I'm disgusted. As I'm listening to it, I welcome the learning instead of saying, God, she's terrible. See, instead of having the judgment to, God, I say so much I hate, instead saying, thank you.
Yeah.
Because it's giving me back a reflection of how the areas where I need to, where I need to, instead of hate, what would be a word that has the positive energy that replaces that?
Yeah, that is giving and receiving love. Thank you
Thank
so much for sharing this.
Thank you.
I love this. To me is the protocol provides people a door to. It's so crazy how there's a
this is
connection
beautiful.
to the two,
Yeah.
but because we're so connected to food,
Yeah.
this is a very, very quick route to this state of consciousness if
Yeah.
people are open to it. So.
It is beautiful. Thank you. May God bless.